Okay.
We're going to catch all of our beautiful edits that you don't hear because we actually do edit the podcast.
We're recording, and you need to just make sure that you're going to talk into the mic.
I know that you're recording because we always do this. You always start recording, and then we just say
I'm not recording yet.
Yes, you are.
I'm not. I was recording.
Yeah. Oh, no shit.
Go.
Oh
do your thing. Do the podcast.
Okay. We don't care about the quality of the content. We're just trying to get it out and get it
just
fucking
hungry.
done. Anyway, welcome back to Cult or Just Weird.
Season 2.
Season 2. Well, we're on now. Don't forget, we're on like episode 3 of
yeah,
season
but
2.
It's still
recall.
season 2.
But season 2. We made it to season 2, which is.
So should we not act like we're like excited about this because we're
gonna
have to, like,
we should
go back and pretend like this wasn't the first episode we recorded.
Oh well.
I'll lie as much as I want.
In any case, this will be episode 3 of season 2, S2E4.
Sweet.
Unless we break up one of the other episodes into multiples, in which case that is also a lie, and then it'll be episode 4 or 5 or something.
I'm probably going to do that.
Oh boy, so I've already lied. It's
yes.
been like 10 seconds.
What do you have for us today?
I have a cult, or maybe just a weird.
Do you have a gut feeling about it? Do you want to prime us with it? Or do you want to wait?
Prime you with my gut. Actually, well, are we going to do banter at all, or just go? Just ready to go.
We did banter. We bantered.
We bantered like about banter, which is, I guess, the only thing we ever banter about.
Well, I hit myself in the tooth with a fork just before going on here.
Cool story, bro.
And my tooth hurts.
Cool story.
I
we're recording. Oh,
right
I know.
into it.
We can talk about Perry. We're recording with the mascot cat, who is currently asleep.
The correct term that
Mascat
was originated on my other podcast is podcastcot.
Podcastcot, excuse me.
So he is our podcastcot.
Podcastcot. Thank you, Perry. He is sound asleep right now. Okay, so I guess we can get into it, but first I just wanted to talk to you about something real quick. You are about to lose the game. Oh, you just lost it. Sorry.
You're doing the game? Oh, everyone listening's going to be so mad. Everyone's going to be so mad.
Can you... Yeah, because everybody listening just lost it too.
Yep.
Can you explain for our listeners what the game is?
I don't think I can. I don't know. I just know that it exists. The game is just the game, and if you think of the game, you lose the game, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a game.
So the game is
if you think
the
of
objective
the game,
is to not think of the game.
Yeah, and if you do, you lose.
And if you think of the game, which we are all now doing,
yeah, we've lost.
You lose.
Yeah.
So as long as you're not thinking of it, you win, which you were all winning until I said something.
Yeah. Thanks.
Sorry.
It's kind of like getting iced, but like psychologically.
Psychologically iced.
Yeah.
Oh man, I miss that.
It's gonna be still a thing.
But you can't counter game someone though, right? Like you can.
I don't know.
counter
You tell
ice.
me.
I mean, you can't. It's just the way that it works.
I feel like technically, if you say you just lost the game, you yourself are also losing the game because
I am. Yeah.
You have to think of the game in order to say you just lost the game.
Right, but if I ice
so it does
you
not behoove
and you have an ice in your pocket.
Yes, I know how that works.
I know. I'm just saying.
it does not behoove anyone to say
no.
you
It's
just lost the
lose-lose.
game. Yeah.
Yeah. The game is just bad for everyone.
Yeah.
But it's funny and weird. I don't know if it's culty. Definitely weird and interesting. But yeah, the crux is that if you're thinking about it at all, you've already lost. Just by thinking about it. Also interesting is that the game isn't the only thing that has that property. Icing and the game are not the only things that have that property.
Should you explain what icing
Oh, I guess we should probably explain that too. Yeah. So if you've never been iced, or even know what ice is, there's a beverage, a delectable
alcoholic
treat, very high class, very classy, called wait, it's not natural ice. That's the beer.
Smirnoff Ice.
Smirnoff Ice. All I could think of was Natty Ice.
No, it's Natty Light anyway.
I'm thinking of Ice House. I'm combining Ice House with Natty. Wow. Okay.
Get out.
I cannot get my low class alcoholic beverages straight.
Smirnoff Ice, first of all. Second of all, how dare you?
Sorry. Smirnoff Ice. And there is just I don't know where it came from, how it started, or if people even still do it, but there's this game called Being Iced where if you bring someone an ice and hand it to them and say you got iced, then they have to drink it.
No matter where they are.
No matter where they are, what they're doing.
They could be giving birth. They could be getting
flying,
married.
landing a 747.
If you ice them, they got to drink it. Unless
except
they have their own ice, and then they can counter ice you, and then you have to drink both.
Right. So if you have an ice on you and somebody ices you, then you pull out your ice and you counter ice them, and then they have to drink both.
It's like when you're playing Crazy Eights, or it's like when you're playing Crazy Eights and you play like a 2 card, and you think you're gonna make the person pick up 2, but no, they have a 2 card, and then you.
Do we have to explain
4.
Crazy Eights now, or can we end this chain of explanation?
Or it's like Uno with the reverse card.
It's like reversing an Uno. In any case, icing is similar to the game, but the whole point here is that it's regardless like of any physical object or beverage that is involved. The idea is just that if you think about it, you've lost.
Yep.
It's the thought that's dangerous.
I swear to God, there's so many directions you could go with this.
I know.
We
will get to whatever that is. I just wanted to say the catchphrase. We'll get to that. So before we do,
it's really I'm very interested to see where this goes, because I might get mad at you depending on what this is about.
You're gonna get mad at me.
I don't know if I can do this.
Okay. So I'm going to do a quick inline content warning, speaking of getting mad at me, for this episode.
I'm so mad right now.
The content warning itself is kind of interesting, because it's not that we're going to be talking about murders or sexual assault or anything involving bodily harm. Rather, this is a subject that a small subset of folks have, in the past, found somewhat mentally disturbing, in a sort of unique way.
I'm so mad.
So if you're the type of person that has a tendency to overthink things, and or you get a lot of anxiety about the future, or generally have a hard time with existential dread, this episode may not be for you. But
except we are both of those things.
I will also say these things, which sounded really weird after you just said these things in a different context. No, it's okay. I'm just like blindly reading my script because it's been so long. No, but I'll say these things. First of all, the anxiety that some people feel about this topic is part of the story itself. Maybe it is the story. And secondly, if you decide to stick with us, and no pressure, but I promise that there is a whole portion of the episode where I will talk to you about why the anxiety and disturbance around this topic is almost entirely baseless. Not to invalidate people's feelings that do feel anxiety about it, especially because the folks that get disturbed by this tend to be actually extremely intelligent, hyper-rational, smart people. But the premises that lead to these anxious feelings that people have are tenuous at best, or honestly, I'd even call some of these premises like silly, if you really look at them.
Well, I call you silly.
And if I didn't think that they were silly, we wouldn't be doing this episode. You have my word.
Mm-hmm. Just because you think they're silly.
Don't get mad at me.
Doesn't mean I'm going to think that they're silly.
So
you're just unilaterally deciding that it's silly.
Until
just
we
FYI.
Get to the end of the episode. Don't get too mad.
I'm mad.
And then for everybody else, content warning, there may be some anxiety-inducing topics that we will talk about as we continue. Okay, so if you're still with us after the content warning, which I'm actually guessing is most of you, because the thing is, content warnings, as good as they are, can tend to have a bit of a Streisand effect. Do you want to explain the Streisand effect, since we're like having to explain? This is going to be an explanation-heavy episode. Do you want to explain that one? I
am not really feeling like being cooperative right now because I'm very mad at you. But sure, I'll go ahead and explain the Streisand effect because I definitely wanted to do work today. The Streisand effect is the name that has been given to an effect that is related to Barbra Streisand. The end. No.
Wow. That's a very good explanation. Thank you.
So Barbra Streisand, the story goes, really didn't want there to be any pictures of her luxurious, I believe, Malibu home anywhere on the internet or like anywhere. And so she was like, no pictures of my house, which naturally made people interested in knowing what the fuck Barbra Streisand's house looked like.
I think that she even got her lawyers involved.
Oh, yeah. No, it was like a thing. It was like she kept doing more and more things to try and get, cease and desist, whatever, all of those things to try and get pictures of her house removed from collective conscience.
Yeah.
And the Streisand effect is when you try to prevent people from seeing a thing that makes them want to see the thing more than if you had just not tried to prevent them in the first place. So what you're saying with content warning is that, like, if you say, hey, there's anxiety-inducing stuff in here, it's going to make people want to listen more.
Right. It's like every time we watch an HBO show and, like, at the beginning it says violence, strong sexual content, nudity. We're like, yes, awesome.
It's got to have all of those, otherwise I'm not watching.
But yeah, I mean, basically the Streisand effect is what the internet calls censorship, right? If when something gets censored and then everybody reads it,
right.
You know, The Catcher in the Rye, right? Being censored only had the effect of making it much more widely read than it probably would have otherwise. So anyway,
it's kind of like,
effect,
sorry, I'm interrupting again, but it's kind of like how every time I go, oh no, what if somebody we do an episode about sues us? You're like, hell yeah, I hope they sue us.
yeah, exactly. Which may happen this time too. I don't know. But I'm not just saying the Streisand effect because of the content warning. It's also something that's going to come up later in the show. So if you're keeping score at home, today's topic overlaps with the game, which is simply the thing that you lose if you think about it. So you actually just lost it again.
Yep.
The Streisand effect, which we just described, in a weird content warning about like overthinking stuff. So not sure if it's a cult yet or not, but very clearly weird.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Very weird. So let's mentally journey back into the distant past, a much simpler era. The year is 2010.
Oh.
And the month is July. President Obama is halfway into his first term, and the biggest thing we're all worried about right now is the BP oil spill. Like that's it. That's the whole thing. That's all of 2010. That's the biggest thing we had to worry about. Much simpler time. But someone on the internet had something bigger and much stranger to worry about. In July 2010, a regular contributor to an online forum called lesswrong.com made a post. What is lesswrong.com, you ask? Here is the quickie blurb from Wikipedia. Less Wrong is a community blog and forum focused on discussion of cognitive biases, philosophy, psychology, economics, rationality, and artificial intelligence, among other topics. I would also add, crucially, decision theory, which is like this weird esoteric discipline that discusses and tries to formulate like why people make certain decisions under certain circumstances.
This sounds so heavy.
Right. So bottom line,
the internet is for looking at cute pictures of cats.
I know, but oh man, I spent a little bit of time on Less Wrong for this episode,
okay.
And like someone like me, like I do find it fascinating.
Sure.
But it is super heavy, and as we'll talk about later, man, is there a lot of inside baseball like jargon on that site. Like they're throwing acronyms around, and like yeah, it's pretty nuts. But basically, they're just like a bunch of hyper nerd, rationalist, AI loving people. Like they're a bunch of singularitarians, basically. Don't mess. Oh no!
You just disturbed him way more than I did.
We disturbed the podcast cat. What was it? Podcast cot?
Yes.
Podcast cot. Anyway, so that's what Less Wrong is. It's just an online forum. The site was founded by an AI researcher by the name of Eliezer Yudkowsky, who I think I'm pronouncing that name right, but like such an awesome name.
That is a really good name.
Eliezer Yudkowsky. Anyway, not Eliezer, but the other person I referenced above, the community member who made this strange and worrisome post on lesswrong.com. The name he goes by on this community forum is Roko.
No, I don't want to talk about this. I really don't want to talk about this.
And to some people, terrifying ideas about a super intelligent AI that doesn't exist yet.
Some people. Smart people.
Yeah, so anyway, yes, my friends, this is why we had to give a content warning at the top of the show. Today we are talking about none other than Roko's Basilisk.
Fuck yeah. Is it Roko or Rocco?
I don't know.
We'll say Roko.
I'm going to say Roko. Okay. And if you say Rocco, then I'll yell at you because that's what you're supposed to do when somebody pronounces something totally validly a different way. GIF. Yep. We'll do that episode sometime.
There is definitely cult behavior there.
That's a cult for sure. So if you know even a little bit about Roko's Basilisk, you know that this shit gets insanely esoteric. I mean, you've already kind of gathered that by the way I described lesswrong.com. So it gets, really esoteric really quickly. And we're going to try to swim into that deep end of the esoteric pool as much as we can get away with. So before we do, though, I want to say, are you with me so far? Like, do you have any questions about what we've already talked about Less Wrong, Mr. Yudkowsky, or Roko, or just sort of like the table we've set so far?
Do you want me to have questions? I don't have questions. but I can make one up.
No, this is just me trying to make sure that everybody is still on board the understanding train so far.
I'm good.
Okay. Listeners at home, any questions? No? Okay. Sounds good. So let's start with the basics. What even is Roko's Basilisk? What the hell am I talking about? All right, because I talked about this guy who made a forum post and the line. What does that have to do with anything? How is it a cult? Why am I talking about AI? So before I answer, and this goes back to what we were talking about just a second ago, I want to reiterate something also passingly mentioned in the content warning. If you start feeling freaked out at any point during the show here, just remember one thing. The theme of this whole episode is about how dangerous mere information can be, and also that we ought to practice responsibility with information that is potentially dangerous. I did a lot of considering and thinking about whether this episode itself was a safe enough parcel of information to disseminate across our platform and our audience, and I decided pretty conclusively that it was. So if you stick with me till the end, I think you'll see why, and you should have any possible anxiety of yours assuaged.
Is that how you pronounce that word?
I don't know.
I always avoid saying it.
Well, now we're on a podcast, so I have to say it. I guess I didn't have to type it. This is my own damn fault.
Yeah, that is your own damn fault. Anyway.
Past me.
I trust you.
Okay. I'm glad that you trust me. I'm glad that I'm part of your trust network.
Maybe.
By now. Okay, so again, what is Roko's Basilisk? Basilisk. Ugh. Oh, this is not a good one for my perceived
your
lisp.
fake lisp that you don't have?
So the simplest way I can put it is this. Roko's Basilisk is the name given to a thought experiment about a hyper-intelligent future artificial intelligence. This future AI then captures, or whatever, any humans that knew about the potential for it to exist, such as you and me right now, because we're talking about it, and every person listening to this.
Yep.
And then tortures them for the rest of their lives.
For the rest of their lives or for like the rest of ever?
I think there's differing opinions on that.
Okay.
It gets into some weird stuff about like the AI may not actually torture you. It may torture some simulation of you.
What?
But then like the people on Less Wrong, and this is sort of getting ahead of ourselves here, but some of them feel like a simulation of you is indistinguishable from you, so it basically is you.
Right.
Or like maybe it's already happening, like some weird stuff like that.
I mean, that I believe.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's after 2016, I believe that bit of it. But anyway, there's kind of different ways that it executes the whole torture scenario bit. But anyway, the point is, if it comes to be and realizes that you knew it could have come to have been,
and
but
of course
didn't help it come to be.
It will know because it's an AI, an all-powerful AI.
And because it's a super intelligent AI, it will know. Then it will find you and it will torture you. And so
cool.
Why does it do this? And by the way, let me know if at any point you're not following me or any of the logic here, as weird as it may be. So the Roko Basilisk AI is not evil per se, actually. This is one of the things I didn't realize and I thought was quite interesting.
How is it not
evil? It's almost freakier this way.
I don't like it.
In fact, it may be friendly, or probably will be, and is quite good. In fact, it may even be so good, so beneficial for mankind, that it runs some simple calculations once it comes online. And those calculations go like this. The AI's existence is so massively beneficial to all humans that every single day, hour, even minute that it took for it to be developed, that it wasn't developed yet, may have literally cost real human lives, maybe thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. And by the way, if you're wondering...
This is worse.
If you're wondering how exactly an AI could be so beneficial, let's just say, for the sake of understanding, the thought experiment that this AI, among other things, can instantly come up with like cheap cures for all known cancers, right? Something like that.
Right.
Because the idea about super intelligent AIs is and a key assumption that we're working with and that they work with on this website is that those super intelligent AIs will be so far above us in terms of their intelligence that it feels like they're going to wield powers that we might view as godlike.
I mean, yeah.
They'll just be so powerful, so intelligent that they'll seem like godlike beings,
right.
Essentially. And we'll come back to that too, by the way, that idea.
But also, yeah, it's way worse for Roko
to not be evil. Yeah, so actually that was
never
originally
heard that before.
That was how it was originally posited. The whole evil thing was sort of just an artifact of like, well, torturing AI, oh my God, that's an evil thing to do. But actually, the way that it was posited is that you've got this godlike AI bringing about this massive benefit, wealth, discovery, maybe ushering in a golden age, the likes of which we've never seen. So much so that the AI and its infinite mathematical wisdom, knowing that if it were now to punish people who knew of its potential future existence, but did not help bring it about, that would motivate and hasten its development, which is actually a good thing because of how much benefit it's bringing.
I hate this.
And in fact, Roko, we're going back and forth. Roko even says in his post something about like, it's something, I forget the word. It's like, he says like brutal in the way only like utilitarianism can be. So this dovetails, which again, we'll get to that quite nicely with utilitarian morality. And utilitarian morality is something that is very prominent on lesswrong.com.
Okay.
One of the things you should maybe keep in mind is that utilitarianism is not the only framework we have for morality.
I've never heard that before in my life.
Utilitarianism?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I actually have a section where we're going to talk about it, but we can talk about it now just real quick, just to kind of level set what it is, and then we can keep going. Utilitarianism is basically if morality was math. So for example, so think about, well, no, but everybody's heard the utilitarian thought experiment of the trolley.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yes.
So the trolley is, there's a train or a trolley train, and it's coming down the tracks, and it's totally going to hit 5 people, but you can pull the lever and cause it to go on the other track and hit only 1 person, but then you're murdering someone.
Yeah.
So would you murder 1 person to save 5? And if the idea behind that thought experiment, which actually a little tangent here because I wound up reading a little bit more about that. You know how these things are, man.
Measuring the coastline.
You're measuring the coastline. You start zooming in, and it just gets more complex the more you go.
Yep.
So, side tangent about this is that's supposed to tell whether you're utilitarian or not. I think there's actually a name for if you say, I don't do anything because I'm not going to kill someone. That is the intent behind that question, because the utilitarian is supposed to say, well, I would definitely kill the 1 person to save the 5.
Right.
But actually they find when they put people into brain scans and ask them that question, people tend to, whatever the section is of their brain that lights up when they're doing that, it's more of a measure of like sociopathy than it is of utilitarianism. Their brain lights up more in the like, yeah, I don't care if people have to die.
Wait, so if you kill the 1 to save the 5, you're a sociopath, or if you don't do anything, you're a sociopath?
It's if you kill the 1 to save the 5, but let me check on that. Philosophically, the sacrificial dilemma has a narrow purpose. Your choice supposedly illuminate. I'm reading this from one of the sources that I'll post in the show notes. It's from a really interesting website actually called lastwordonnothing.com. We can talk about what that is, but anyway, reading from here, philosophically, the sacrificial dilemma has a narrow purpose. Your choice supposedly illuminates whether you fall into one of 2 camps on moral reasoning. Choose to hypothetically end a life and save a few more, and yours is described as utilitarian judgment. Rejected, and you are said to be making a non-utilitarian, which they call deontological judgment.
Deontological.
Yeah.
I love that.
So, roughly translated, the utilitarian is concerned primarily with outcomes, while the deontologist has a morally absolute point of view that holds that you couldn't tell a lie to save someone's life because it's wrong to tell a lie. And they even mention that Kant is the most extreme member of this camp.
Wait, so if you wouldn't tell a lie to save someone's life, you're deontological?
Correct. It means you have morally absolute positions.
Oh.
Like, it's wrong to kill, period. I don't care that there's 5 people on the other side of the track.
That's just wrong.
Well, maybe you're too utilitarian then. Maybe you should go spend some time on lesswrong.com. In any case, so they go on to say that doing some of these experiments reveals that not only does a utilitarian response not actually reflect a utilitarian outlook, it may actually be driven by broad antisocial tendencies, such as lowered empathy and a reduced aversion to causing someone harm, which kind of makes sense. In the real world, given a choice between 2 kinds of harm, most people wouldn't be able to cost it up quite so coldly.
That makes sense.
Right? Which is part of the thing with the trolley problem, too, is that it's like, I think most people that think about the trolley problem, or at least when it's posed to them for the first time, go like, isn't there any way that we could like just put on the brakes?
Right.
Or could we derail the trolley? Could we just untie the guy? Like,
Right.
It's hard to, when you completely strip away that real world context, then you find yourself in this situation where the answer that you give says more maybe about like one aspect of your brain than the other. You know, if you have to force you to answer that, then it's like, sure, yeah, 5 is better than 1, I guess. But most people, I think, have like maybe an initial aversion to it. And if you don't, I think that's what they're saying. Like, 5 is greater than 1. Yeah, do that. Kill the one person for sure. Right? Versus saying like, can I save all of them? I don't know.
Right. Or like, because for me, I like when I'm posed that question, I know I would want to say, if the only options are kill 5 or kill 1, I know I would want to say I'd throw the switch and kill the one person.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I'm really like honest with myself, I don't know if I would actually
It's hard.
be able to do it.
Right,
Like,
it's hard.
even if morally I'm like, that's the thing you should do, but I don't actually know if I could do it. I think I would freeze up and panic and not even be able to like...
Right. And there's a lot of other things too that play into it that like you have to control for, you have to ignore in the trolley problem, which is like probably what you would do is whoever you were like closest to. Like if the person that you were killing was like in the room with you saying, please don't kill me, please don't kill me, and the other 5 people were like half a globe away, then you would probably let the other 5 people die.
Right.
Like there's a whole thing about how more proximity makes it much easier to kill, which is like part of a problem with our modern weapon systems.
Right.
It's really hard to kill someone with a knife. It's a little bit easier to kill them with a gun.
Right.
It's easier to kill them with like a sniper rifle or a mortar, or it's even easier to kill them with a drone system from half a continent away.
Right.
So anyway, back to utilitarianism. That's one of the things that Roko mentions in his post, is that there's this harsh utilitarian nature to the thought experiment, that this robot is actually maybe doing good. Mm-hmm. And because it's doing so much good, that it's actually good for it to torture these people that knew about it and didn't bring it into existence.
Yep.
Right? Now, again, if you're getting freaked out about this, trust me, there's plenty to undermine this, least of which being that utilitarianism is not the be-all and end-all for morality, which means that that's not definitely the thing that a robot would do.
I also don't know if you've quite illustrated as to why people might be getting freaked out about this at this point. And the why
which is actually
that...
kind of a good thing. Like,
yeah, okay.
So
I was going to say the why, but...
Well, so, yeah, I mean, we'll kind of get to that, but it's also, like, people that, like, our listeners, unless they're also Less Wrong forum members, are probably going to have to make some mental leaps to get to the point where they're like, oh, I see why it freaks people out, which is actually good.
Right.
And normal, I would almost say. And that's kind of it's also kind of what makes this a good topic for Cult or Just Weird, is that there's like a certain subset of people with their own rituals and vocabulary and everything that make this like an effective sort of harm that happened to them. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what makes it a good topic for the show. Let me go back to the point in the script where I was. So we were talking about Roko's Basilisk and how it has this utilitarian imperative to say, I'm going to torture people if they knew about it and didn't help me bring into existence. If you're still not kind of getting it, try this analogy. Let's say you're trapped in a house, and there's only 2 rooms in this house. And you're trapped in one room with a bunch of people, but the other room next to you is an abusive monster. And the monster is locked up, the door is locked. So if even one person starts trying to unlock the door, you might reason out that, oh boy, you better also help unlock the door so you don't get punished for effectively increasing the time he's been locked up in that room. So the monster doesn't actually even have to say anything to you or your fellow captives, or even know that you started picking the lock, to have his future decisions and your current motivations interact in this weird way that makes the lock get picked faster.
Right.
And that may make you worry now that, oh shit, I'm going to get tortured by this future thing that may or may not happen.
Right.
That's basically Roko's Basilisk in a nutshell. If you know about it and then it becomes real and you didn't help it exist, it will torture you forever.
Yep.
So let's just say this has freaked some people out, mostly on the Less Wrong forum.
And me.
And Kayla, which we will get more into later. But once again, if you're feeling that, I promise you this entire thought experiment sits on a house of cards, and a lot of the cards are missing. So try not to worry too much. But you were just asking me a little bit about, do people understand why it freaks people out? So I think I've kind of illustrated that.
Yes.
Because it's the idea that, oh no, I'm worried about this future artificial intelligence that's just because I know about it is going to torture me. And actually, unfortunately, that's actually sort of the most interesting part to me about Roko's Basilisk is that the danger isn't really the AI. It's not actually the Basilisk. And in fact, the Basilisk isn't even really referring to the AI itself.
Oh, really?
It refers to the thought experiment.
Oh.
It refers to the piece of information. So this goes back to the top of the show when I was talking about, the information being dangerous. That's the actual danger. Knowing about Roko's Basilisk, if you believe in it, is the thing that makes it dangerous to you. And in fact, that's where the badass name comes from. Obviously, the Roko part is named after the Less Wrong forum poster that posted about it. The Basilisk part references the mythological creature known as the Basilisk, whose power as a creature is that anyone that even looks at it dies instantly just from having seen it. Something I learned in doing the research for this episode, actually, is that Roko's Basilisk is already a second-degree reference. It's not actually referencing the mythology. I mean, it is, but really it's referencing something else that's referencing the mythology. It's from a short science fiction story called BLIT. It sounds terrifying. Actually, BLIT doesn't sound terrifying. I read about the story, and the story sounds terrifying.
Oh, God.
In this story, humanity has developed certain images that they call basilisks that have the property of having some specific patterning in them that if a human looks at them, it triggers the brain to undergo a lethal shutdown, sort of like introducing a virus into a computer that causes it to crash.
Jesus Christ.
So Roko's Basilisk gets its surname actually from that short story, which references the whole if you look at it, it's already too late, you're fucked thing. I was just short aside here. You know the movie The Ring?
Yes.
So when The Ring was first advertised in theaters, I thought so the movie is actually about is if you watch a video, then a ghost comes out of the TV and kills you or
in
whatever.
7 days.
In 7 days. I actually, when I originally saw the trailer for it, didn't know it was a ghost thing. I thought it was more of if you watch this video, I actually thought that it was this basilisk sort of thing. That if you watch the video, that it just fucks up your brain mechanics and then you die from it. Which to me was always a much cooler, scarier thing than just when I learned it was just about another ghost. I was just ghost, whatever. But this
Did
idea,
you ever see it?
Yeah, it was decent. In any case, just aside there about I thought The Ring was actually this.
Aren't you just so smart?
Oh man, yeah, I am super smart. Somebody please give me a movie to make because I'm obviously way ahead of the curve on this stuff.
There you go.
So now you also know why we referenced the game at the top of the show, which, by the way, you just lost again.
So rude.
But a bunch of people have compared this whole phenomenon to the game. Which
Really?
predates Roko's Basilisk by a few years. Yeah, but you can kind of see why, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole thing is, again, it's not about the AI, it's the thought experiments that is the dangerous thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thought experiment has caused people distress. And it caused people distress by this weird sort of, oh my God, as soon as I know about it, I'm screwed.
Right.
The same way that the game does, as soon as I know about it, I've lost. It's sort of a high stakes, anxiety-ridden version of the game. Perfect for millennials.
We need that.
All right, quick breather time. Any questions about what Roko's Basilisk is or about its weirdo basilisk nature? What a basilisk is.
What does Roko's Basilisk look like in your mind's eye?
It looks like a little lizard.
Mine looks like...
Actually, you know what it looks like?
What?
So, it looks like a lizard, but it looks like a very specific lizard. Once again, here's a reference, Magic the Gathering.
Oh, God.
There was a card in the first set of Magic called a Basilisk, and it had the property that if it engaged in combat with any other creature, the other creature died.
Uh-huh.
Get it? Anyway, that's just the image I have in my head of a basilisk now, and it kind of looks like a fucking iguana. It's nothing special.
Well, mine looks like... Let me see if I can find, a picture of it. Okay. In my head, you remember Trogdor the Burninator?
Vaguely. I remember the name. I don't remember what he looks like.
Trogdor the Burninator from Strong Bad, which Deep-ass cuts right now. He looked like this.
Yeah.
So he looks like a terrible drawing of a dragon with a single buff arm.
Yeah, he definitely skips leg day.
But he looks like, in my head, he looks like...
That's pretty good, actually.
A really realistic, like a more like scary realistic version. And I literally just Googled Trogdor the Burninator realistic. And I got like fan art.
Please show me.
Of a magic card. It's Trogdor. That's what Roko's Basilisk looks like to me.
That is a very good depiction. It's not what I was thinking.
That's what it looks like to me.
But it's much better.
Yeah,
Holy moly.
That's what Roko's Basilisk looks like to me.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So now that you know what it is, let's go back to our little historical timeline.
Okay.
So Roko makes his post July of 2010, and it garners some thread comments on the site that vary from things like, this is an interesting post, to this is super entertaining, to I don't know, man, this is a little bit freaky. There's places that have preserved this original post.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't read every single comment on the post, but I didn't really get the impression from the comments that it was like that people were really losing their minds over it.
Interesting.
But there's one comment that I can almost guarantee that if this comment never happened,
no,
we wouldn't even know about Roko's Basilisk to this day. And that was the comment reply from Eliezer Yudkowsky himself.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
He is very active on the Less Wrong forums that he created. I've read some of his stuff. It's very interesting, very full of all of the jargon town.
Right.
He seems to generally be, by the way, like we'll get into him more later because, criteria. But he seems like generally a good dude, smart dude. He actually came up with the whole concept of like a friendly superintelligence.
Right.
A friendly artificial superintelligence.
A super friendly artificial
Super friendly, not very super smart, like friendly but dumb. No, he came up with the idea of that. So
okay. So you're saying he's our charismatic leader?
Maybe I'm saying that.
Oh my God.
I mean, he started in Less Wrong.
That's true. Oh, he started.
He was the creator of Less Wrong.
Oh, I don't think
Did I not say that?
No, I don't. You might have. I think I just missed it.
Yes, he is the creator of the Less Wrong forum, but he's also very active posting and commenting.
Okay, here's my theory. He is the super friendly AI, and this.
You're gonna change your idea about super friendly here in a second.
No, but he's the product.
He's the thing.
This is. Oh my God.
Is your mind blown?
Yeah, I can't say he's the Basilisk anymore because the Basilisk is the thought experiment. He's the AI. He's the AI.
Okay,
he's
maybe.
Trying to warn us.
I think he's a person, but you're right. I
think he's the AI.
Maybe he's the friendly AI that's... Here's the thing. We're all artificial intelligences anyway, right? We're all man-made.
I know I am.
Hey-o. I don't know if I would say intelligence in your case, though.
Oh
right?
my God, you made a joke that was basically the same joke that I made. You're so funny and smart.
Mic drop. Yeah. Anyway, let me quote you he has a pretty long comment reply on this post. So I'm just going to quote you part of it. Quote, "One might think that the possibility of punishing people couldn't possibly be taken seriously enough by anyone to actually motivate them. But in fact, one person at SIAI, which we will talk about that later, which is the Singularity Institute for Artificial Intelligence.
Oh, geez.
One person at SIAI was severely worried about this to the point of having terrible nightmares, though they wish to remain anonymous. I don't usually talk like this, but I'm going to make an exception for this case. Listen to me very closely, you idiot." All caps. "You do not think in sufficient detail about superintelligences, considering whether or not to blackmail you." And by the way, blackmail is the whole process of saying, if you don't help me come into existence, I'm going to punish you. That's the blackmail they're referring to.
I don't think I understood that sentence at all.
The one I said or the one he said?
The one he said.
Yeah, me either. But here, let me reread it regardless, just because I like reading in all caps. "You do not think, but you understand the blackmail bit, right?"
No, I didn't understand the sentence.
Okay. Pause in the sentence. When they talk about...
Who's they?
People on Less Wrong.
Okay.
When they talk about the future Roko's Basilisk intelligence punishing you if you didn't help it come into existence, they call it blackmail. The same way that I would be like, if you don't... I have dirt on you, so you better give me money or else I'm going to release the dirt. It's that.
Okay, so Trogdor is blackmailing you.
Roko is, or not Roko. Roko's the guy that made the post.
Yes, I'm saying.
Yes,
the AI.
The AI is blackmailing you.
Okay.
You may wonder, how does the AI blackmail you when it doesn't exist yet? That's actually a key part of their whole thing, which we'll get to. But that's their shorthand for that whole thing we described as blackmail.
Okay.
So let me reread his sentences. And so he's replying to Roko here. You do not think...
Wait. Okay. Sorry. I got really confused. I got really confused. I thought that the guy who created Less Wrong was also the guy who posted about Roko's Basilisk first, but no, it's two different guys.
Two different guys.
That's why I was very confused. I was like, he's talking to himself. I don't understand. Okay, I get it.
Okay.
I understand now.
No, so
My fault.
Roko posts this thing.
Yes.
On Less Wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Eliezer Yudkowsky, the creator of Less Wrong, comes to this post and replies to it in a comment.
Yes.
And then in the reply, he says the things I already said about somebody at SIAI having nightmares about this. And then he says, I don't usually talk like this, but I'm going to make an exception for this case. Listen to me very closely, you idiot, talking to Roko.
Okay.
You do not think in sufficient detail about superintelligences, considering whether or not to blackmail you. That is the only possible thing which gives them a motive to follow through on the blackmail. That's where I'm going to end the quote, but he goes on to continue with his comment in equal measure of, let's call it, urgency instead of hysteria.
Okay.
There's actually a bunch more of that quote. And I was saying, let's call it urgency instead of hysteria. I just don't want to call it hysteria because I think he actually had good reason for being so upset. Mm-hmm. And he's since talked about the fallout from Roko's Basilisk. And he says that his upsetness, which I believe him, was not because he thought the idea itself had real merit, but rather that it was reasoned out powerfully enough by Roko, like he presented this case powerfully enough, that it was causing people that had these thoughts and these ideas in their brain from already being Less Wrong members and thinking in certain ways and having this utilitarian mindset and all blah, 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 that it was causing people distress in his community.
Right. That makes sense.
And that's super valid. Just remember when we were talking about how the most interesting part of the Basilisk isn't the thing itself, but the fact that the idea was hurting people.
Right.
So that's what this is. And he'd probably be pretty mad at me then for making a podcast about this, actually. But that's why I'm taking so much precaution to content warn everyone and also to get to the part where we clean up this mess we're making. And actually, we mentioned this before, but because this podcast is directed at a general audience and not at members of Less Wrong who have all those mental preconditions for something like Roko's Basilisk to bother them, it's possible that he may not even have a problem with this. I mean, there's been a ton of articles come out, which that's what we're about to talk about here. We're finally at the part of the episode where we said we'd get back to the Streisand Effect. Remember we were talking about the Streisand Effect?
I do remember we talked about the Streisand Effect
the Streisand
many
Effect
moons ago.
being the whole censorship. If you censor Catcher in the Rye, it becomes more popular.
Right.
If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
So bummed you said that because I was going to say it.
Oh, I should... man, I'm sorry. I should let you react more.
No, you're the bigger nerd, so that's fine.
That's fair. Yeah, you're just the pretty face, I guess. So that's what ends up happening here, because what Yudkowsky did next, after he made that very long, angry, all caps, idiot calling comment, was to delete the post about Roko's Basilisk.
Oh, jeez.
And ban any discussion of Roko's Basilisk on Less Wrong.
Oh, my
I think he even deleted stuff that got discussed after that.
Holy shit.
He was very concerned about it. And he's also, I think, since said, that may have been the wrong thing to do.
Oh my God. Oh, my God. He did it. It's his fault. He's the Basilisk.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that, but, remember when I said if it weren't for this comment, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it? That's 100% true.
But even though he tried to suppress the discussion about it, if the AI became if it became real, he would not be up for torture because he actually did the work of getting people
the more people know about it,
and it's
maybe that's why he did the Streisand Effect thing, was because he was worried about Roko's Basilisk and reasoned out that if he spread the information by Streisanding it, then they'd be like, yo, good job, buddy. You helped people know about me, and now I'm real.
That's exactly what happened. We cracked this case.
We cracked it.
Moving on.
So it's funny that we just went through that, because that type of, if he knows, then I know, and then that thing is it's their whole site. That's all Less Wrong is. It's like, they talked about, remember when I said most of what they do is decision theory?
Right.
It's all that. It's all well, if the AI knows that I know this, then it's going to torture me because XYZ. That's the whole thing. You already knew, even if we didn't say Streisand effect earlier, you know what that effect would have if I just said, yeah, he banned it and then like deleted stuff. The idea basically took off.
Right.
And pretty soon you have articles on Vice, on Slate, even Business Insider wrote about the damn thing.
Slate's where I found out about it.
Yeah, Slate I think is where most people found out about it.
Slate, do you remember when I sent the article to you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember?
Because it's called The Most Terrifying Thought Experiment of All Time.
Yeah.
Is the name of the article. It's very clickbaity.
2012?
2014, I believe. It took 4 years for it to get to the mainstream. It probably was starting to get into some internet spheres before that, but I think the Slate article is the one that kind of took off. But yeah, it really exploded into the general consciousness to the point where a lot of our listeners probably already know about it. Hell, I knew about it, and I don't think before doing this research that I'd even heard of Less Wrong, which is where it originally came from.
Just be clear that...
Had you?
You knew about it because of me.
The important thing here is that, yes, my own wife polluted my brain with a dangerous idea, and this was like way before I did all this research that made me not worried about it at all.
Yeah.
You were just like, hey, here's this thing that me sharing it with you fucks you already.
Yeah.
Look at this thing that could kill you just by looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. But had you heard of Less Wrong?
No.
Yeah, I hadn't either, which is kind of crazy. By the way, you know that guy, what's his name? He's famous for being famous. He shitposts on Twitter. Oh yeah, Elon Musk. He got together with Grimes because she made a tweet about Rokoko's Basilisk. Yep. Which is just super clever.
Oh my God, so funny.
Do you want to explain, should we explain Rokoko, or we've already explained too much? It's just an art style that's like very ornate.
Overly ornate.
But the point is that it sounds like Roko. So she said, Rokoko's Basilisk. And then I guess Elon thought was so funny. He would just slide into her DMs, yada, yada. Then they became an item.
Now they're having a baby.
So
let's be clear.
Thanks, Less Wrong and Roko.
Elon Musk, inventor, science, entrepreneur man. Grimes, alternative Canadian pop singer.
Yeah, I prefer my description of famous for being famous and Twitter shit poster. But I guess you could sort of say he's an entrepreneur as well.
Oh, and then she went from being hardcore lefty to be like union busting because she got with him.
Well, that or is it because the Rokoko's Basilisk?
Maybe it was Rokoko's Basilisk. Either way, she's a union buster now.
Elon, don't hate us, just in case we ever need to have you interview on the show, because we could totally do that. I know he does interviews on podcasts because true. I've seen him smoke. So anyway, that's how Elon got together with Grimes. I guess bizarre Twitter references is like Tinder for the hyper wealthy, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, so here we are, 10 years later, and you and I are now part of the pop culture explosion that brought this whole weird post to the public consciousness. Distressing to some, but ultimately more, I think, interesting and more culture just weird. So yeah, I feel good to be part of that whole thing. It's pretty cool. Question though.
Yeah.
We've talked about this in like 4 or 5 different places now. How worried are you still about Roko's Basilisk?
I mean, clearly I'm not so worried that I won't talk about it. And clearly I'm not so worried I've done nothing in order to bring about its existence. Although I guess one could argue that...
You haven't done shit. Although now we are.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
This is our ticket out.
One could argue that by me bringing the article to you, I did my part in that now you have spread the word to our listeners. So Roko's Basilisk, I did my job. This is what I'm supposed to do.
So there are some followers of this whatever thought experiment, followers of the Basilisk, that think that it's not you did something, it's did you do as much as you possibly could. Sure, we put it on our podcast, but did you liquidate your entire life savings? And
well, I feel like those people are wrong.
Well, you're welcome to disagree, but there's some people that think that if you don't do as much as you possibly can, then you're going to get tortured.
Here's the thing. The super friendly, intelligent AI has to be rational enough to understand that human beings' brains do not work in such a way that the mere possibility of something is going to be sufficient enough motivation in order to get them to do the thing.
Oh, you're starting to pierce the veil. We'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that.
Okay, good.
So actually, that's sort of what this transition is that I was about to do. If you are still worried, it's time to start administering the cure.
Thank you. I need
it. As
it.
a lead into that, I'd like to read to you just an amazing and insanely relevant quote from one Philip K. Dick. It goes, quote, "For each person there is a sentence, a series of words which has the power to destroy him. Another sentence exists, another series of words, which will heal the person. If you're lucky, you will get the second. But you can be certain of getting the first. That is the way it works. On their own, without training, individuals know how to deal out the lethal sentence. But training is required to deal out the second." End quote. I really like this Philip K. Dick quote.
That's a good quote.
It's literally this, right?
Right.
And it's actually, I don't want to, we'll get to that, but we'll get to that. There's a whole interesting paper that I read for this episode, and it's about something called information hazard.
That's my band name.
And information hazard is essentially the theme of this episode. It's information itself can be harmful.
Right. And that's what the government tries to tell us.
Well, it's super interesting. This paper is really interesting because you kind of go like, oh, I wonder what that's about. And there, like, he really outlined just more ways than you think that information by itself can be harmful. And kind of when you get to the end of it, you're like, oh yeah, like sort of the pen is mightier, right? It's that kind of thing. Like information is actually extremely, extremely potent.
The penis might Sorry. Oh God.
Oh my God.
Oh, welcome back.
So we talked about that first series of words that can destroy you already. So let's start with the next series of words that can heal. To really understand not just what Roko's Basilisk is, but why it is and how it came to be, which is part of this process, requires some background in actually a few different areas. And this is where we start talking about utilitarianism a little bit.
Okay.
Which we kind of already talked about in the episode, so I don't have to say as much here. But the basic idea behind utilitarianism is that you are concerned with outcomes and you take a very mathematical approach to it.
Do you feel like that's you?
Yeah, maybe. Yes. I don't know. Like here, I think, is there like a word for like flexitarianism? Because I think that there are some cases where you have to make utilitarian choices because it's. So let me do this quick tangent. For me to answer that, I kind of have to talk about the Kobayashi Maru.
See, I told you were the bigger nerd.
Yep, I definitely am. So for those of you listeners who don't know Kobayashi Maru,
good for you.
It is good for you. That means you're not a nerd. It is a fictional Star Trek reference.
It's actually pretty cool, though.
It's very cool. So the idea behind the Kobayashi Maru is that it is a test that they give to Starfleet cadets in their training, and it's a simulation test. So basically, you go into this room. It's like they do simulations in the Navy and the Air Force and whatever, but it's similar to that. And so pretend you're a captain for a bit, and you have your teachers are like all the officers around you, and then you do this training thing, and the idea is that there's some distress signal that's coming from over the border of an alien race that the Federation is at war with. I think it's the Romulans. You have to do the simulation of going to rescue those people, but you have to make these hard decisions of like, if we go over there and try to rescue this ship, then it may cause even more harm because then we're violating this treaty. And bottom line is the whole thing is like a glorified sort of trolley problem that they give to cadets. And it's supposed to basically test to see how a captain in a command position will respond to situations that sometimes call for harsh decision making. Most people don't have to pull the lever to kill the one in favor of the five, but if you're the captain of a starship, you might have to. So that's why they give them these tests. And famously, Captain Kirk, and it's an unwinnable test, right? So like it is a guaranteed, you will lose the test. Nobody has ever won. It's designed to be lost. Just it's how you lose it that is instructive. But famously, Captain Kirk is the only person to have ever won the Kobayashi Maru because he cheated.
It's so hot.
Yeah, because he was like, fuck this, and went in and reprogrammed the test ahead of time so that it was like, and I think he actually didn't even like reprogram it to be like winnable. I think he reprogrammed it to be like easy mode. So he could just
I don't know if that's what happens in the new Star Trek.
Is it not? I don't know.
I think he just kind of goes like, fuck it, I'm going to do it. Maybe I'm wrong. I think in the Chris Pine one, he doesn't do that, but I could be totally wrong.
So the reason I bring that up is because I think like I really like to use that as sort of a framework for how I think about morality sometimes, because I think that there are some cases when what Kirk does is not correct. And it's like, that's not going to be the real world, man. The real world, you're going to have to make these hard choices. And sometimes you are going to have to, as the starship captain or as the captain of a aircraft carrier or as a leader of a company, whatever, as a leader, you might have to make a decision that you need to be utilitarian, and it's going to be hard. And you have to live with stuff like that and be able to do that as a leader. But then I think there are some other cases where it's better to be Captain Kirk, and it's better to say, wait, you said A or B. Is there a C? Mm-hmm. Like, what is the third path, right? Like, is there a way to stop the trolley? Is there a way to untie the person, right? Kind of going back to that thing. So to me, it kind of comes down to the Kobayashi Maru. Like, sometimes you have to be Captain Kirk, and sometimes you just have to do the damn test. And
right.
It's not always clear, though, which one it is. I don't know. That's my answer to whatever the hell you asked. It's
a good answer to the question that I don't remember that I asked.
Yeah. All right. Cool. What did you ask?
No idea. Which one
you said like, am I a utilitarian?
Yeah.
That's my answer to, am I a utilitarian or not?
Let's go watch Star Trek.
So here's where utilitarianism comes into our story. The Less Wrong forum, where Roko's Basilisk was birthed, is chock full of utilitarian thought. So we talked about this earlier on the show a bit, but Less Wrong articles and discussions frequently resemble that scene in The Princess Bride where the Sicilian does that whole
God. It's so
I know,
stressful.
you know, I know, but then if I know, then you know, then therefore type logical gymnastics. And that's all based on decision theory, which we've talked about before and we'll talk about in a minute again. And the decisions made in those I know, you know, I know chains tend to be based on some utilitarian calculation. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's like, I know, you know, I know, and this is how I'm sure that the AI is going to behave because it's going to do this utilitarian calculation. For example, I might predict that you will decide to purchase a certain bag of chips if you go to the grocery store because you like those chips.
Okay.
That's the basic thing. Like if they provide you some utility, so I'm going to say, I predict that is the decision that you, Kayla, will make in the future when you go to the grocery store. Mm-hmm. That's the type of things they're doing with their decision theories.
I can poke a hole right in that right now.
Okay.
Do you want me to?
Sure, go for it. Poke a hole in those chips.
I don't think I have ever gone to the grocery store to purchase myself a bag of chips.
Okay, that's not what I meant with the example.
Just saying.
The example is, okay, what's something fine? What's something you have gone to the grocery store to purchase?
Tofu.
All right, so then I might predict that you will buy a certain thing of tofu because you like that brand. Mm. You find utility from that brand, so I can predict your actions in the future. That's what they're doing on lesswrong.com. Or maybe I put you in a trolley problem simulator and predict which way you will choose, and I will use math to make that prediction because obviously everyone, including you, makes your decisions using utilitarian framework, right?
Absolutely.
Everyone obviously must be using utilitarianism. So that's what they're doing on these forums. They're assuming a universal utilitarian framework, everyone, including inscrutable future hyper-intelligent AIs, and then using that to predict what decisions people and AIs will make, AIs like the one that Roko thought up.
Right.
Now, I'm going to say this again later because it's important, but utilitarianism is a useful tool to deploy to understand how decisions can be made. But it's just a tool.
Right.
It's not something that can be applied to all things, even all decisions at all times. And it certainly isn't a good enough reason to invent a vengeful AI deity. But, you know, as they say, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, I guess, right?
True. I tested that out once. It really changes the way you see things.
You tested out only owning a hammer? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that must have been...
It was a very difficult time in my life.
How did you drive to work using the hammer?
I didn't, because it looked like a nail. So I smashed my car.
Yeah, that's definitely what the analogy is here.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. No, the analogy here is that the hammer is utilitarianism. And
right.
If that's all you're using, then everything kind of seems like it must be... You can break it down into some sort of utilitarian calculation.
Right.
I'll add on to this that utilitarianism isn't just something that deals in whole numbers either, and this is especially true when it comes to discussions had on lesswrong.com. Utilitarianism can also deal in probabilities.
Ooh, probabilities.
Probabilities. So these are the types of thought experiments that go, if a magical genie says you can kill one person, and then I'll flip a coin, and if it comes up heads, I'll cure all cancers, would you do it?
Wait, say that again?
So you find a magic lamp, and you rub it, and the magic genie comes out and says, if you kill one person, one random person on the world, you have to decide that they will die. But then if you do that, I will flip a coin, and if it comes up heads, I will cure all cancers that have ever existed. Would you do it?
Probably.
Yeah, probably, right?
But if I had to kill the person, then
probably not.
Oof, I don't know.
It's tough to say.
Depends, yeah.
But I use that example because it's like an sort of an obvious you take that bet, and it uses like a really big probability. It uses big probabilities in small numbers, right? It uses a coin flip, it's 50%, right? And it uses relatively small number of you only have to kill one person. So it's like it's as obvious as you can get with like, yeah, sure, you take that bet, as long as you're the type of person willing to sacrifice the needs of the one for the betterment of the many.
Right.
But we're talking about things like, what would a super intelligent AI look like that we won't even invent for another 100 years? And probabilities with something like that start getting astronomically low, astronomically fast. Right? They're very what if, and they're very like tiny, tiny chance of things like this happening. And the less wrong folks know that, but the problem is they still think the math is worthwhile, and I'm here to tell you it's not. Or maybe not that it's not worthwhile, it's just that it's not meaningful. The thing is, human beings are very bad at understanding and processing the consequences of extremely low probability events. Our brains just kind of go like, it's either high, low, or 50-50, and that's like about as much as we can really conceive of in terms of like making decisions and thinking about this stuff. When you start saying, well, this outcome is so disastrous that even a tiny probability is worth thinking about, you are actually not correct. It's still not worth thinking about. By way of example, you have a non-zero chance of going outside and getting hit by an asteroid, but that doesn't mean you should spend any time during your daily routine of looking through a telescope and making trajectory calculations.
You sure about that?
100%, yes.
You seen Armageddon?
I've seen Armageddon and Deep Impact.
I don't know.
So, yes, I am sure about that. And just to illustrate, so one of the, and this is semi-well known now, but one of the examples that Eliezer Yudkowsky has posted on Less Wrong is the question, is it better for some absurdly astronomical number of people to get a speck of dust in their eye, or for one single person to be tortured for 50 years with no reprieve?
The dust.
Right. Maybe. But like they have literal, like they debate about this, right? And he's positing that it's better to have the single person get tortured. So here's the thing. You're not hearing or reading the types of numbers he's talking about. He's talking about numbers so astronomically high that our brains can't even conceive of them. Like beyond Googleplex numbers. There's numbers.
Well, there's not that many people, so what the fuck are you even talking about?
Right, but don't ask me, ask him.
Also, no, if Googleplex people got a speck of dust in their eye, it's still better than one person being tortured nonstop for 50 years. That's wrong.
But according to a utilitarian, you can assign some utility to that, and even if it's the tiniest inconvenience, if you multiply that by enough people, then it's worth the inconvenience of a single person times the inconvenience of being tortured.
That's sociopathy.
That's what utilitarianism is, and that's the danger of maybe only applying that in any context.
These people actually think that it's better for one person.
Not all of them. It's a debate on the site.
But if you're a utilitarian...
If you're utilitarian, then yes, there is some number of people that you can say that would be true for. It's not 100, it's not a Googleplex, but maybe for some near infinitum number of people that might be true for. It's just math.
It's not math.
Okay, think about it maybe this is easier. Is it worth one person being tortured for 50 years if every single human on Earth had to have to be tortured for one day?
I feel like that's a completely different thing. Like a speck of dust in the eye is like...
I mean, either way, you're talking about some detrimental effect happening to a person, right?
Yes, but a speck of dust in the eye is
either it's pain and suffering, or it's like,
normal.
oh, my eye.
Yeah, but that's like normal day-to-day shit.
Right. And see, what I think is happening right now is your brain is having a hard time, like, making the leap from normal numbers to, like, meaningless numbers.
Maybe, but I don't feel like that's what's happening to me. I feel like that there's no number of people. I'm sorry to harp on this. I'm just saying I feel like there's no number of people getting a speck of dust in their eye.
That's right.
That outweighs.
Well, yes.
One person getting tortured.
So here's what I'm going to say. This is how I think of it. Is there's no meaningful number of people that could have a speck of dust in their eye to make that worth it. I think that you can talk on a website about the math of the utility of a dust speck versus the utility, or I guess I should say anti-utility of a dust speck versus the anti-utility of torture. And you can do those calculations, and this is actually what the rest of this sort of like little section of the podcast is about whether that's meaningful or not.
Gotcha.
So let me finish a couple sentences here and then come back to that. Basically what I'm saying is I'm not advocating here that I'm either like pro-torture or pro-spec, but rather when the numbers get that absurdly large or when probabilities get that absurdly small, human concerns like torture and specs and eyes are completely meaningless.
I'm pro-spec.
So here's an analogy. You could talk about using a tiny fraction of the energy emitted by a black hole to power your Subaru, but by the time we've reached the scale of black holes, concerns about how you get your Subaru to take you to work have long since disappeared in the proverbial rearview mirror. Proverbial rearview mirror. That is a tongue twister.
I am still pro-spec.
That's fair, but whether you're pro-spec or pro-torture is sort of beside the point, right? You can say you're pro-spec, you can say you're pro-torture. What I'm saying is when the numbers get to the scale that they are, the meaningfulness of those numbers sort of goes out the window. And one of the ways I like to think about the scale problem is that there is a difference between what is conceivable and what is meaningful, right? So human brains can conceive of numbers that are just beyond understanding. Like actually the notation that Eliezer is using on his site when he talks about the dust speck is using this like crazy mathematical notation that results in just numbers that make Googleplex look like nothing, that make Googleplex look like just not even a dust speck, so to speak. And I mean, I could even sit here right now and like in the next 2 seconds, I could write a number that is bigger than the number of atoms in the universe or larger than the amount of seconds that have transpired. Like that's, it's easy for humans to conceive, to come up with these numbers. And I could easily write a number right now that was smaller than the Planck length. Right. But there's a difference between what I can conceive of and then what is in fact meaningful. For the Planck length, for example, I've heard scientists say that it's the smallest meaningful length. I can conceive of lengths smaller than that, but they don't have any physical meaning. It's the fabric of reality just doesn't support that level of fidelity.
Right.
And then a similar thing I think happens when you talk about numbers that are so large, such as in the dust speck example, is that I can certainly conceive of numbers that large and I can even do math on them and talk about utility, but I just don't think that they're meaningful because by the time you've gotten that large, things like the age of the universe or a Googleplex or whatever are so far beneath that, you've already left meaning behind way before you even get to those numbers.
Right.
So that's kind of what I'm saying here, if that all makes sense. Now, if you take all that and talk about it on a website and play some mental math with I think that post to me is perfectly fine. The problem is when you go from like a fun conversation you have, when you're high with your friends to being scared about an actual future artificial intelligence that may be applying some of these low probability, high impact sort of things, that's when it starts to become a problem because now you're worried about something that is essentially meaningless.
Right.
Does that all make sense?
I think so. I'm still pro-spec, but...
I know. This whole time I was saying that in your head, you were just going pro-spec.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't listening. I'm saying you haven't swayed me. Makes sense.
I'm not trying to sway. I'm saying that neither...
Pro-spec all the way, baby.
I'm saying that neither pro-spec nor pro-torture have really any meaning because the question is meaningless to begin with.
Okay, well, we're going to settle this with a Twitter poll, so it's fine.
Great. Actually, we definitely should. Any questions about utilitarianism and even like probabilistic utilitarianism?
No.
Okay.
Too big. Too much.
Too big.
Too
monkey brain
yeah.
can't think. Yeah. So utilitarian theory, taken to absurd scale, is cool and all, but that's just one part of how folks on Less Wrong talk about decision theory. So let me talk here about one of the jargony bits, and trust me, I'm only going to talk about one of them. We can't talk about all of them because we just don't have the time. But this is something called an acausal trade. That's one of the words they like to throw, phrases they like to throw around. Another one, by the way, the biggest one that gets thrown around with things like Roko's Basilisk and on other parts of the site is called timeless decision theory. An acausal trade is a concept within that theoretical framework. I won't talk about that because that's even longer, but I will go into what acausal trade is because I think it's worth it to at least talk about one of their bits of jargon.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Do you think that everyone on this site has watched The Good Place?
At this point, yeah, probably.
Did they make it?
Maybe.
Did The Good Place happen?
I wouldn't be surprised.
When Michael Schur found this website?
I was
and then
literally
it
just about to say
turned
that.
into The Good Place.
I wouldn't be surprised if Michael Schur was like reading some posts on Less Wrong and was like, I'm going to make a TV show. And it's going to be a primetime television show where all the characters are dead. So, acausal trade. In other words, a trade that lacks a direct cause, therefore acausal. Think about your standard everyday normal person trade. You give me an apple, I give you an orange. Or you give me money, and I give you a garage full of LuLaRoe leggings or whatever.
10 grand.
That's a causal trade, right? That's like a direct, like, you give me X, I give you Y. An acausal trade is a trade in which you give me something in an implicit exchange for a promised behavior or even an expected behavior or other consideration. It's essentially a promise or an expectation, and the Less Wrong folks are very big on the use of promises or expectations as motivators in their decision theory theorizing. It's all very game theory-esque, and in fact, here I'm going to use a board game example to illustrate the point a little better. I don't know how many of our listeners have played a game of Risk, but if you've played any board game... No, I don't think my mom's played Risk. But if you've ever played Risk, or if you've ever played a game similar to it where there's a table full of people and they're all sort of fighting each other to be the one on top.
Right.
You probably know of the crazy revenge guy at the table. Everybody's playing, trying to win, and then there's the one guy where he's like, if you fucking attack me, I am going to destroy you the whole rest of the game. Are you
talking about me?
So that's you at our table. Yeah.
Because that's literally what I did.
Yeah.
The one time we played Risk.
Yeah. But there's always at least one revenge guy where they say, I swear to God, if you attack me, I don't care if I lose at that point. My goal will be to take you down.
I think it's the best way to play the game.
That is an acausal trade. So when I decide to not attack Kayla because I know she's a crazy pants and she's going to fucking revenge me the whole rest of the game, you've made an acausal trade with me.
Hell yeah.
You have influenced my behavior based on me knowing you're going to behave in a certain way if I do it. I haven't said, hey, Kayla, let's, if I help you attack Bob and then you help me attack Alice, then we're allies. It's not that. It's, I know that if I attack you, you're going to go all crazy. And even to the detriment of your own ability to win the game, that's what you're going to do. So it's this weird thing, right? It's rational, but irrational at the same time, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, that's why it's the best.
It's irrational because, well, of course she wouldn't do that because then she's going to lose the game. That's stupid.
Don't care.
But by making that promise, you have essentially insured yourself against attacks from some people who are worried about that kind of thing.
But you got to be willing to follow through.
Right. That's the thing. You have to be willing to follow through.
Otherwise, it's empty threats.
And otherwise it's empty threats. So some people are, some people aren't. It depends. But that's exactly what they are using to conceive of Roko's Basilisk.
Okay.
It's an acausal trade in that exact same manner, except it's in reverse, right? The robot, the future Roko Basilisk AI is saying, I promise you that you will get tortured unless you help me become existing. So it's the same type of thing. It just happens in reverse time instead of forward in time, but it's the same concept.
So don't play Risk with Roko's Basilisk.
If that makes sense. Well, don't play Risk with Roko's Basilisk, but we also know that when we play Risk with the crazy revenge guy, sometimes the crazy revenge guy is all talk, and sometimes they actually decide they want to win the game instead of just take revenge on somebody from, what they promised they were going to do.
Those people are disgraces.
You better hope that Roko's Basilisk is like that, because
Basilisk is a disgrace.
Because part of
but he's a disgrace if that's what
part
he
of
does.
The thing that debunks what potentially could happen from an AI like that is the fact that they will probably have much better things to do than tortured somebody from the past, they're actually what they're really worried about, unless wrong, isn't even torturing you. It's torturing a simulation of you that they think of as you.
Right.
So basically what we're saying is this future hyper-intelligence that is essentially godlike and inscrutable.
Right.
But we can totally screwed it, which is a word, right? Screwed
Yeah.
It. If it's inscrutable and we screwed it.
Screwed it.
Yeah. So we're saying it's...
C-R-U-T. Screwed.
Screwed. We're saying it's inscrutable, except I totally know how it's going to behave.
Right.
And it's going to behave in this way, and it's going to take valuable resources that, a god will totally care about doing,
right.
and create a simulation of little old me and torture that simulation of little old me. Why would it do that?
I mean, my argument...
It has a risk game to win.
My argument would be that if Roko's Basilisk is as godlike and powerful as we say, then it doesn't expend any resources or energy torturing you.
Well,
it's just omnipotent, and it can, and all powerful, and like torturing you. But making good on that promise is not taking away from its precious time to like go solve galactic risk. That's my fear.
But omnipotent isn't actually a thing. Like at some point, it does actually have to spend something akin to resources, or at least time or cycles or something.
Does it?
I don't know, but one of the analogies that was given in Rational Wiki, which I'll cite in my sources later, was what we're doing right now is akin to two ants trying to figure out how a human brain is going to work.
True.
I don't know, like maybe it's going to smush us ants, or I probably won't care. Like right now, I don't really care whether ants that existed a million years ago were working towards evolving humans.
True.
I'm not going around looking, where are those ants? I got to torture me some ants because I didn't try to make me be alive. So.
Well, that's also putting the ants in a position that they're not in. The ants are not sentient, and the ants don't have any capability of speeding up evolution.
How do you know that we have any capability of creating something like Roko's Basilisk?
Because Roko's Basilisk has come back in time and fucking told us by posting this fucking thing. Just saying.
You are a true believer.
I am.
You need help.
I'm in the cult.
So, going back, do you understand a causal trade now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mostly because I'm the risk vengeance.
Because you are the vengeance person that uses an a causal trade to get people to not attack you.
Yeah.
So, as you pointed out, though, a causal trades are not binding, and any future Basilisk-style AI would know this. And here's the thing. It doesn't matter if they even have, like you said, even if they did have infinite resources to torture you anyway.
Right.
The fact that they know a causal trades aren't binding means that suddenly the blackmail is not effective, and therefore it breaks the acausal trade, and therefore there's no reason to torture you.
So the Basilisk goes, they know that this is not binding, so therefore this whole thing is illogical, put a line through it, it doesn't work, doesn't make sense, so I might as well not do this.
Right. I told you it's a bunch of they know, I know, you know, they know.
I'm just saying I need to think on that for a little bit before I feel comfortable.
All right. Keep thinking on that with your ant brain compared to the Roko's human brain.
That's insulting.
It's true, though. So we've talked about the limitations of utilitarianism as being a tool and not a universal framework for looking at the world.
Did you just call Roko's Basilisk a tool?
Talked about how absurdly scaled numbers and probabilities quickly get you into the realm of meaninglessness. And we've talked about acausal trade being non-binding, although to be honest, I mostly told you the acausal trade story to illustrate some of the ritual that is involved with this group.
Ooh.
With all of their jargons. Now I want to reference another episode of ours.
Oh, shit.
In fact, our 4th episode of season 1, in which we talked about, do you remember? 4th episode?
The game.
Pop quiz hotshot. No. Oh,
what?
wait.
Yeah.
The game. Sure. Yes. Sorry. That was the name of the episode.
Yeah.
Star Citizen.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I understand why you got confused for a second. Yes,
yeah, I
it was
thought you were
called
talking
The Game.
about the game that we've already referenced in this episode.
Oh my god, that episode. Do you realize what that episode is? That episode's called The Game.
Yeah, I know.
If you
no, every time you listen to that episode, you lose the game.
Yeah.
Sorry, you guys.
Sorry, guys.
So we talked about Star Citizen in that episode, and we also invoked good old Pascal's wager as a lens to look at what was going on. Can you remind our dear listeners
absolutely not
about what Pascal's wager is?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You don't remember Pascal's wager? It was like a big part of that episode.
I don't remember. I have absolutely no idea what you're. I don't think we talked about this thing that you're.
This is a terrible acausal trade we're making.
Sorry, I don't know what Pascal's wager
I
is.
should have promised to torture you in the future. Okay, so Pascal's wager is the thing that goes like this. I might as well believe in God because if I decide not to believe in God
right.
and there's no heaven and no God,
right.
then doesn't matter. I wasn't going to heaven whether I believe in him or
right.
not. If I decide to believe in God and there's no heaven, then I don't go to heaven. But if I decide to believe in God and there is a heaven, then I do go there when I die. So believing in God strictly, and this is actually also a game theory, sort of like Matrix, right?
Right.
The believe in God choice dominates, right? Because if there's no God, no heaven, then it doesn't matter either way. But if there is, then you better believe in it because otherwise you're going to hell or not going to heaven or whatever. That's Pascal's wager.
And it is faulty.
Right. So with Star Citizen, the version of Pascal's wager was, I better believe in the thing being Star Citizen becoming a real game. Because if the game doesn't happen, then no big deal. But if it does, then I get to play this awesome game that I've always wanted to play. Right? That was the version for Star Citizen.
Right.
But Star Citizen, viewed as this future entity that you might as well believe in, took it a step further. Fans were, and still are, attempting to bring the entity into existence by donating money and resources and a lot of it. Belief in a future entity because of the potential consequences coupled with a desire to bring it into existence? Does that sound familiar?
Are you saying Star Citizen is Roko's Basilisk?
Sort of. It's Roko's Basilisk with a carrot instead of a stick.
Okay, so basically what you're telling me is that we should give money to Star Citizen so that we avoid being tortured for eternity.
Well, no, but that's the thing, right? Is that Star Citizen is carrot versus stick. So
I don't know that it is.
One of the things was... So Star Citizen is like, I might as well donate because there's a nice little juicy reward for me at the end if I win. Same thing sort of with Pascal's wager, right? There's a juicy heaven reward. The sort of shitty thing about Roko's Basilisk is that it's only conceived of with stick and not carrot. It's only conceived of being tortured. There's no version of it where if I donate to this, then the Basilisk will have known that I was going to do that and therefore reward me because I donated to it. There's no version of it where that happens.
Okay.
Which there's no reason for that not to exist because carrots and sticks are both motivators.
What happens,
just kinda
though,
weird.
if you reach the end of your life and as you're dying and you die, and then you find out that if you are somebody who helped Star Citizen happen, you get eternal salvation.
Wow,
and if you're somebody who didn't, eternal damnation.
Then I would definitely donate to Star Citizen.
So that's what I'm saying. Just because it looks like it's carrot doesn't mean there ain't no stick.
I guess. I'm not really seeing the tie-in from making a game exist to eternal life in heaven.
Because it's Roko's Basilisk.
Yeah, but only in the sense that you are trying to make a game exist.
Yeah, but
not
maybe...
in the sense that you are going to heaven.
It's under the guise of a game. It's not actually a game.
I see. So you're like just way extrapolating.
I'm just saying Roko's Basilisk disguised itself as a video game to get people to make it happen.
Got it.
And now if you don't
you're on shrooms.
Contribute to Star Citizen, eternal damnation.
Yeah, I think you got exactly what we were trying. Yeah, that is the correct plot line of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Right. So actually, we are not the only ones to draw this parallel.
Oh shit.
It's been, well, okay, so hold on, let me be clear. The parallel between Pascal's wager and Roko's Basilisk, not between Star Citizen.
I bet you were not the first to do that either.
Probably. So it's actually been discussed quite a bit, and over much more than just Roko's Basilisk. Apparently there's enough fretting over future superintelligent AI that Pascal's wager has come up a lot. In fact, here's a quote that I'm citing from Rational Wiki again, that they in turn are citing from a writer by the name of Greg Egan. Quote, "You know what they say the modern version of Pascal's wager is? Sucking up to as many transhumanists as possible, just in case one of them turns into God."
Oh, okay, so I need to start doing that. Okay.
I love that that's your reaction and not like, oh yeah, snarky, that's funny.
Oh no, that's good advice. It's solid advice.
So you should be tweeting "I love you" at Elon Musk.
I think really this is just about who has certain kinds of anxiety and who doesn't.
Yes. That's literally what this is.
It's just about like what's wrong with your brain. Like if this pokes your anxiety,
then you experience a certain type of anxiety. Yeah. Yes. All right.
Well, aren't you just so lucky?
Dude, I get super anxious about
Not about this,
existential
though.
stuff. Yeah, because I read all these things, which I am now sharing with you. So just in case it isn't obvious as to how the Pascal's wager fallacy applies to this sleek modern robo-god, this AI that we have never seen but a subset of humans thinks exists, well, the exact same way it applied to the crusty old school Judeo-Christian god that we also have never seen but a subset of humans thinks exists. And that is, yeah, sure, maybe the future Basilisk AI wants current you to spend your time and money helping it exist, but what about the other future AI whose only goal was to make sure the Basilisk AI didn't exist?
Stop! No!
Oh shit, now you've pissed that one off. Oops.
Well, now I have to worry about that now, too. How am I going to please both of them?
So this is the same thing that shoots down the original Pascal's wager, which is that there's a prerequisite that the god that you're wagering on is both alone and omnipotent. It's the classical logical fallacy of assuming the thing you're trying to prove. And the nature of these Pascal's wagers and how they motivate people to spend money on them, they've been referred to by one economist as Pascal's scams. And there's even a trope on lesswrong.com itself that calls things like Roko's Basilisk Pascal's mugging.
Jeez.
Which I just love that term so much I can't even tell you. But what that really demonstrates, by the way, is that not everyone in Less Wrong is afraid of the Basilisk. Like, there's people that are like, yo, this is just making people upset and, like, goading them into donating money to something that they really shouldn't have to do.
Wait, are you telling me that people donate?
Oh, yeah, we'll get to that.
Wait, no, hold on. Off podcast. Are you serious right now?
Why off podcast?
Because I need to know. Otherwise, my
Kayla, that's the whole thing. The whole thing is if you don't donate to the if you don't help it exist.
I didn't know it was about donating money.
Well, how else do you think it was?
I'm literally about to cry.
How
like,
else
this is
did you?
Really upsetting me.
How else did you think you were supposed to help this AI
I don't
exist?
know. Who donate to who?
We'll get to that.
I don't like this.
What? Because people are actually like taking it to heart and acting on it. Yeah, it's shitty. So we'll get to that.
Oh my god.
But yes, there's a trope on lesswrong.com called Pascal's mugging, which I just love. But anyway, that's the whole thing with Pascal's wager is the many gods argument sort of shoots it down. It's like, okay, like sure, if there was only one god, then that would be a true wager. But what if, you were betting on the wrong god and the right god was like, oh, if you believe in that one, you'll actually go to hell.
This is stressing me out.
Just
tell me where to give the money.
But you knew that. You knew that's the thing that's stressing you out is
I just need to know.
You could have been giving money.
Yes.
Actually, I'm not going to tell you now because I really don't want you draining our bank account.
It's too late.
Holy shit. All right. So, on that, it does seem to be an issue. For example, there is an institute now called Machine Intelligence Research Institute, formerly called SIAI, which we have mentioned just an hour or two ago in the show, which stands for Singularity Institute for Artificial Intelligence, that takes donations and takes them for the cause of, quote, reducing existential risk from the development of AI. Now, this is all well and good.
I'm like, that's not specifically Roko's Basilisk.
But I can see where this starts to sound like a Pascal's mugging.
Right.
If you're positing that there's an existential, humanity-wide risk from something that may or may not happen in the future and, in fact, has a terribly, terribly low probability, you're back in this territory of infinitesimal small probabilities times disastrously large consequences equaling, I don't know, about like $20, give or take. But again, with probabilities that small and consequences that large, the math doesn't quite work out that way.
Right.
So this is why I brought up the thing about the speck of dust times the whatever, right? Because it's a fun thing to think about. It's a fun thought experiment. But if you actually do that math and say, okay, yeah, it's about $8, that's when it starts being like, no, you took something that was like conceivable but meaningless and tried to assign meaning to it. And that's where you broke.
I'm still pro-spec.
I understand that. We'll just call this episode pro-spec because that's...
No matter the number.
I know.
Also, tell me where to put the money. Is it to this people?
Anyway, that's why I brought that up, right? And yet, not only did SIAI say that type of math was possible, but they actually did the math. And they would tell you exactly how many lives you were saving per dollar donated, and I think it came out to 8 lives per dollar donated. They actually did that math and said every dollar you donate to SIAI saves 8 lives. Now again...
I'm very upset right now.
Remember, this isn't a calculation based on how many malaria nets they can ship overseas. which is like, okay, this times this many equals this many lives saved, right? This is based on, well, there's a 0.001% chance that a world-destroying AI will be developed. So if we can reduce that chance by an even tinier 0.0001%, then let's see, carry the one. Yeah, about 8 lives per dollar.
This is the most upsetting thing.
And they took people's money. And like all good cults, I don't actually think they were scamming. I think they really believe this math. For example, here's a commenter on Less Wrong talking about how he's doing his part. And this is part of a much larger comment that he made, but just quoting a little bit of it. Quote, "What am I doing? Working at a regular job as a C++ programmer and donating as much as possible to SIAI, and sometimes doing other useful things in my spare time." Blah, blah, blah. He continues on, end quote. By the way, SIAI's founder was none other than Less Wrong's founder, Eliezer Yudkowsky. Now...
no. I'm done. I can't do this podcast anymore.
I realize I'm dropping that knowledge here in a way that makes it seem really dramatic, and that's intentional because I aim to entertain. But I will say, I honestly do not think that Eliezer is a scam artist. I don't. If he were, I don't think he would have tried to shut down the Roko's Basilisk post so forcefully. Mm-hmm. Conspiracy theory about Streisand Effect aside, I do think Mr. Yudkowsky, from what I've read, is genuinely concerned about mitigating existential risk that comes from AI research.
Okay, but what is the money doing?
Here's what Wikipedia has to say about what SIAI, now known as MIRI, M-I-R-I. MIRI's approach to identifying and managing the risks of AI, led by Yudkowsky, primarily addresses how to design friendly AI, covering both the initial design of AI systems and the creation of mechanisms to ensure that evolving AI systems remain friendly.
Okay.
MIRI researchers advocate early safety work as a precautionary measure. However, MIRI researchers have expressed skepticism about the views of singularity advocates like Ray Kurzweil, who we both like, that superintelligence is just around the corner. MIRI has funded forecasting work through an initiative called AI Impacts, which studies historical instances of discontinuous technological change. So that means like big jumps in technology. And has developed new measures of the relative computational power of humans and computer hardware. MIRI aligns itself with the principles and objectives of the effective altruism movement.
That helps me a lot. That like just really contextualizes it and like makes me go like, okay, so this isn't just people taking money from people and driving a Ferrari away.
That's what I'm saying here. Specifically, I'm saying like I dropped the whole his name to be dramatic, but he's not an MLM leader. He's not he's not stealing people's money.
He is doing like that's actual good work.
Yes,
that is important.
They do good work. It's just that there are some people who fell prey to the anxiety thing that you were talking about because of this is essentially a home for the type of people that would have these kind of fears. Otherwise, they wouldn't be talking about it and working on it.
Right.
And then they kind of fall into that trap and then feel like they have to donate money because if I don't donate everything I can, then I may end up being tortured by a future AI.
Right.
So maybe it was a little irresponsible of me actually to like drop his name like that because I genuinely think he's doing good stuff.
Right.
I just think that there's, it's just the situation.
Right.
It's the situation in the community. And I also don't think that the Streisand Effect thing that he did was super useful, but we all make mistakes.
Like you right now.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I don't think you make a mistake.
So I want to go back to Pascal's wager real quick, specifically the God part. Maybe this goes without saying, but we here at Culture Just Weird are also far from alone in speculating on the singularity and future godlike super AIs as being sort of a new techno-religion. In fact, I think singularitarians are even on our like to-do list of maybe we might do this in the show one day.
Right.
Which I guess is like actually kind of what this episode is. But,
right.
But anyway, for our listeners who are unsure or unaware, the technological singularity is just a fancy word to talk about how pretty soon we may have super intelligent AIs that will transform, revolutionize our very society and our very existence and may involve things like living a really long time, living forever, uploading our brains, our consciousness into computers, that sort of thing.
And
it also has its own gods.
We're going to die.
And its own gods are these super intelligent AI that, and so the reason that this is like, if you're wondering like, why are super intelligent AIs like going from just my shitty, stupid computer to godlike beings? The primary way that that's discussed is that once machine intelligence reaches a certain threshold of both like complexity, like general complexity, and also power, that it may itself want to design an additional superintelligence, and being that machine intelligence is smarter than us, it will do a better job than us of creating a new intelligence, which then itself will do a better job than its robot creator of creating a new intelligence, and so on and so on and so on. And it will just spiral until, before we even notice, because of that cyclical effect, we'll have some super intelligent AI that is just so far beyond understanding that we're like ants to it.
Just go watch the movie Her.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Yeah, go watch Her. It's an excellent movie.
Best depiction of the singularity.
Yes, actually. So far I've seen, yeah. And you and I are both like huge fans, and we both like Ray Kurzweil. And Ray Kurzweil is a futurist? Well, yeah, I think that's the name. And we've read some of his stuff, and he's like a very positive-oriented optimist about the singularity. He actually works at Google now. I think his title is futurist there, I think. Yeah, he does.
Him.
So that's sort of explaining like how the singularity of superintelligence would allegedly come to be. And it's been playfully referred to as the Rapture for nerds.
And it's very true.
Which is very true, because it's sort of, if you think about it, it involves these like godlike beings. It involves eternal life. It involves a lot of these things that we sort of maybe want to be true or make us feel safe, and or require some article of faith to believe in. And it's just using technology instead of like old school religion stuff. So the Roko's Basilisk shenanigans kind of does a good job of illustrating that whole point about some angry, inscrutable God.
Are you going to send this to Elon Musk?
What, this podcast? Yeah. I'll definitely tweet it at him, man. We'll get so many fucking listeners. Holy shit. One of my favorite articles I read while researching this episode was entitled "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry Artificial Intelligence." And I highly recommend it. It was such a good article. It's on a blog called orbitermag.com, and Orbiter Mag, which I had never heard of. Apparently it's like a blog that talks about the meaningfulness of technological type things, which is, I think we sorely need things like that. But anyway, the title of that article is clearly referencing the classic historical Jonathan Edwards sermon, "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." And the article itself, of course, draws parallels to the Roko's Basilisk thing to that famous sermon.
Right.
The article goes on to talk about how religious awakenings of the past have typically followed some pivotal technological change, such as the Protestant Reformation coming in the wake of the printing press, or Jonathan Edwards' own era of religious awakening in America coming on the heels of things like the train and the telegraph. Which then begs the question, why should the recent advances of computer, internet, personal devices be any different? Why shouldn't we also be experiencing some sort of religious awakening, which maybe this is sort of a part of?
I like that.
So here's a great quote from the end of the article, which again, you should definitely go read the whole thing on Orbiter Mag, because it's really good, and I really like Orbiter Mag as a blog now. Here's the quote. "Religion is implicit in such technological change. It behooves us not to argue for its elimination, but to render more sophisticated forms of understanding it. As much as Roko's Basilisk as a concept deserves disdain, the reality is that self-aware artificial intelligence, whether malevolent, benevolent, or something else, will surely be developed sooner rather than later. Such a development requires a religious response." End quote.
Damn.
And I think they're absolutely right. Maybe not a Catholic or Jewish or Muslim response. That's not what they're talking about, but they're talking about a response that involves things like metaphysics and morality and ethics and that sort of stuff.
And reverence.
And reverence, absolutely. So it's fascinating, right? And I'd also like to add here that I'm not even sure that Roko's Basilisk deserves disdain. The folks on Less Wrong are very smart people. They include AI researchers, coders, developers that are 10 times smarter than I am. And I think they actually came up with a really interesting thought experiment. It's just an unfortunate side effect that sometimes digging around for truth isn't always safe for the miners. There can be hazards in mining each other's thoughts for insights and information just as surely as there can be hazards in mining the earth for diamonds. I just hope that most of them are okay now.
Me too.
And speaking of hazard, I said we'd, quote, get to that about something called information hazard quite a long time ago in the show now.
You did.
And here we finally are. Although actually, we've been talking about an information hazard this whole time. That's what Roko's Basilisk is. Remember we mentioned it's not so much the AI that is the problem, it's the thought itself.
Right.
And don't forget, that's something that Eliezer was saying about why he was so upset about it too. So he understands, I think, like what the issue is.
A single thought. Sorry.
A single thought, and you can be paralyzed into donating all of your money to research artificial intelligence.
Yep.
So we've been talking about information hazard this whole time, but I really wanted to mention a fascinating paper I read for this episode by one Nick Bostrom, who you may have heard of. He's a relatively famous philosopher at Oxford. Here's his Wikipedia blurb. Nick Bostrom is a Swedish philosopher at the University of Oxford, known for his work on existential risk, the anthropic principle, human enhancement ethics, superintelligence risks, and the reversal test. I don't know what that last one is.
Fuck is the reversal test?
I don't know. Mr. Bostrom's paper defines an information hazard as, quote, information hazards are risks that arise from the dissemination or the potential dissemination of true information that may cause harm or enable some agent to cause harm. Such hazards are often subtler than direct physical threats and as a consequence are easily overlooked, end quote. This is just like the most interesting topic to me, because one of the key things about information hazard that he makes a point, that he kind of mentions there and really makes a point of in the paper, is that information can be free and true and yet still hazardous, still harmful.
Do you remember the whole point of the first book of The Expanse?
Yeah, that's totally information hazard.
Yeah.
It's about like the push and pull between, for those of you who haven't read The Expanse, there's this guy who like has this sort of this virtue, which actually I just was about to write about here, we're about to talk about here, but we assume that free and open information is purely virtuous and always good. And there's a character in The Expanse that has the same ethic, and we sort of identify with that, but then the book, and actually the rest of the series even, sort of like calls that into question. Like, is it always good to have all information be as free and as open as possible?
Fucked up.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and it's very counterintuitive, which I'll talk about some examples that maybe make it less counterintuitive here. I'll definitely link the paper in the show notes because I cannot recommend it enough. It's so interesting. And he actually categorizes and puts into sort of like a taxonomy all sorts of different types of information hazards. So here's a short list. This is like half of them. Data hazard, idea hazard, attention hazard, signaling hazard, evocation hazard, enemy hazard,
what?
Knowing too much hazard.
That's me.
Information asymmetry hazard, unveiling hazard, ideological hazard, distraction and temptation hazard. That's me. And again, that's only like half. So if you read the paper, you'll see it's also one of those interesting things where you kind of go like, oh yeah, I think I knew about that. That actually does kind of make sense. So for example, I mentioned enemy hazard above, which is basically a thing where like we as a country have military secrets. Because if we allowed, for example, the design of the F-22 Raptor to become common knowledge, it would put our national security at risk vis-a-vis our military enemies. And then it's not quite enemy hazard, but like while we're talking about military stuff, you could, and I think he maybe did in the paper, posit that knowledge of how to build a nuclear device is information hazard. Because again,
True that.
if it were free and common knowledge, we would all be at more risk. And that's why, for example, we can't just make a YouTube video about how to refine uranium. You will rightly get in huge trouble with the U.S. government. And I know this because a YouTuber that I like mentioned it on his channel, that why he didn't make a video about that thing ever. It's like this chemistry dude.
Right.
You know that guy?
Nile
Red, yeah. He recently had a video where he worked with some uranium compound, and he was like, I thought about doing a uranium refining thing, but then I realized I would have gotten in huge trouble with the government, so I didn't. But again, the reason for that is because the government is trying to protect against this information hazard. Anyway, this information hazard paper is now referenced on Les Wrong's very own article about Roko's Basilisk. That's actually where I found the paper. So Les Wrong for a long time had censored all whatever, but now they have their own article on it because obviously it's like so famous now. It's just, for a long time, Eliezer would only write about it on a Reddit forum about this type of stuff.
Right.
But now they have their own article on it.
Good.
But the reason they have it there is this paper is because ultimately that's what the basilisk is. It's a piece of information, a little mimetic virus that a particular portion of the population is vulnerable to, and it is hazardous to their mental health.
Me.
And information hazards are, at large, what Les Wrong is kind of all about. They and the SIAI, now MIRI, have the goal of reducing existential risk from information hazards involving AI. And I think it's generally a good mission, even though it may kick off some mental trauma and poor life choices from time to time amongst their community.
Right.
So real quick, before we get to the Criterion Judgment, just like I did in my first episode of the season, I'm doing this thing where I'm throwing sources in at the end. I'm not sure if I'll keep doing it this way. I guess it depends on like our listener feedback and yada yada. But it feels a little bit easier for me somehow to squeeze them in at the end versus the beginning. But like I said, feedback pending. So here, I think all of the places I went for research on today's topic. First of all, lesswrong.com's article on Roko's Basilisk. I also reread that old Slate article, Roko's Basilisk, the most terrifying thought experiment of all time.
I still read Slate every day.
Wikipedia's articles on Less Wrong, on Eliezer Yudkowsky, Business Insider's article, so aptly titled for their magazine, What is Roko's Basilisk?
Oh, I like that.
And then there was a Vice article with maybe even a better title, Explaining Roko's Basilisk, the thought experiment that brought Elon Musk and Grimes together. Because that's, to Vice, that's the headliner for Roko's Basilisk.
Yeah, there literally a new life has been created.
Oh, shit.
Because of this.
It begins. I bet it's more than one. I bet people are having like scary
Oh, sure. But
anxiety
I'm just saying,
sex.
Specifically, Grimes and Elon Musk are having a child.
Yes.
Because they met on Twitter because of this.
I know. And there's also an article out there called This Horrifying AI Thought Experiment Got Elon Musk a Date. That's on livescience.com. And that seems to be a common theme. KnowYourMeme.com has a whole article on Roko's Basilisk because it's a very mimetic thing, obviously. And there's a couple videos I watched on YouTube. Orbiter Mag, which we mentioned, that article, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry Artificial Intelligence. And then there's another really good blog out there called LastWordOnNothing.com with an article entitled Who's Afraid of Roko's Basilisk?
Me.
Of course, I also I read that whole paper by Nick Bostrom because it was so fascinating. It was one of the first things I read because the very first thing I read was actually the Less Wrong article about their own thing, about Roko Basilisk. And then the second thing I read was the Nick Bostrom paper, and that's when I was like, oh, we have to do an episode on this. It was that interesting. And then finally, I made heavy use of rationalwiki.org's article on Roko's Basilisk. And I highly recommend it. Was a great article. They have a great article on Roko's Basilisk. It really details out in a much better way than we did even on the show here, where it came from, the nature of Less Wrong. They even go into a little more detail about like timeless decision theory and a causal trade and some of the like really esoteric stuff that sort of generated this thing. And then they also have this whole section called So You're Worrying About the Basilisk. And it's actually all about like, here are the different reasons that you shouldn't worry about the basilisk. It's actually really extensive. It's almost like half the article. And when I was talking about the reasons you shouldn't be afraid of the basilisk, like a good chunk of it sort of was inspired or framework or came from that part of their article. And then finally, at the very end of that section, there's a little header that says something like, I know it's rubbish, but I'm still worried. And they're basically like, well, you should probably talk to a therapist then, because it's, they're like well, no, but they're not being like, that's the thing. It's like Rational Wiki.
I'm going to my therapist tomorrow and I'm like, should I talk about Roko's Basilisk? I don't know.
Rational Wiki is typically very cheeky in their articles.
Right.
But this section was part of what made me kind of go like, all right, good job, you guys. The fact that they made that call to mental health.
Right.
And they even said if you are having trouble with existential sort of fears, like that's something that maybe like a university campus mental health professional may have more experience with. So anyway, Rational Wiki's article on Roko's Basilisk, very good. All right. It's finally time for the criteria and the judgment. So let's do this. Okay. We're going to do that. We're going to do this for like 10 minutes.
Number 1.
Jesus Christ.
Expected harm towards the individual, socially, physically, financially, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, population of cult. That's not what it is anymore. What do we call it now? Is it niche?
Is it niche? And we are never going to rewrite that, apparently.
And, well, because it's... whatever. 3, anti-factuality. Closed logical system. 4, percentage of life consumed. Not vampirically, but how much of your time is devoted to the thing. Ritual is number 5.
Mm-hmm.
And number 6, charismatic leader. And for some reason, I don't think that this is accurate anymore. When we originally conceived of this, we put alive leaders, cult of personality. That's definitely not how we've addressed it.
Yeah, I don't know why we wrote that. That
alive.
was literally years ago now.
Yeah.
So
those are our criterias. Well, what's the cult? Is it?
I think it's the community.
Wrong?
I think it's the less wrong. It's less wrong / SIAI or MIRI now.
Expected harm. I feel like it's high.
Yeah, I mean, so there was a poll.
The information hazard is high.
Yeah, the information hazard is high. There was a poll, I think some internal poll that they ran recently-ish, a few years ago at least, not back in 2010 or whenever when this was happening, and it was something like, I think between 10 and 15% of people were like still worried about it on the site, which is like pretty high.
Pretty high.
When you think about how like freaking weird it is.
It's like 1 or more out of every 100.
It's 1 out of every 10.
No, it's 1 out of every 100.
No. See, this is what I was talking about earlier in the episode when I was saying
Kayla is bad at
people
math.
can't conceive of probabilities.
Fuck off. I said the wrong thing.
It's 1.5 out of 10.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm saying it's fairly high.
Yeah, I would say, since we're saying expected harm, good job past us using the word expected,
Yeah.
I would say it's fairly high.
Population of cult, is it niche? I mean,
the other thing about the harm thing, too, is that it's not just mentally anguishing. It's also people are, like, spending their real
it's
hard-earned dollars.
financially draining, yeah. Is it niche? I mean, it seems fairly... This particular community seems fairly niche. I would say, given the extensive writing that's been done about Roko's Basilisk on the internet, that concept is not niche.
True.
But this community... and the like really hardcore like philosophical, ethical, whatever kind of thinking that they do is a niche population.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that since we're talking about the community as the cult, I would say it's definitely niche, even though this one thing happened to go like mega viral.
Right. This one is tough.
What's this one?
Anti-factuality. Because it's like yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, anti-factuality. They want you to believe that it is better for a bunch of people to not get a speck of dust in their eye and just torture someone. This is all about the
spec. It's all about the spec.
Just saying, feels anti-factual to me. But I think in terms of, that was a joke. In terms of like having a closed logical system, I don't think that exists here because it seems like these people almost like take the logical to the opposite extreme where it's like almost hazardous with like following the logic so to the letter. So
that's the exact line of reasoning that I forget the article because I read so many of them, but there was one article that follows that exact line of reasoning that was basically like being irrational can be harmful, but actually like being way too rational can also be harmful. Yeah. And it went basically to that extreme.
Which kind of makes me go like, is it kind of anti-factual? Because it's like when you get... no, I'm serious. When you get this...
It rolled over.
Pedantic, but when you get this literal...
Yeah.
You are kind of not existing in real-world logic anymore. You're kind of not existing in, like, experience.
Yeah,
you're not existing in, like, real... It's like, okay, the television show Nathan for You. The way that those writers craft... the like business proposals is they get, and this I know this actually
because you worked there.
They get into an extremely logical frame of mind, and they try to be so logical that it's insane and silly.
Right. Yeah, and that's what part of what makes that show so genius.
Yeah.
And that this definitely feels like a similar sort of thing. It's like so logical that it's
a different kind of anti-factuality.
Yeah, it's weird, right? I think it goes back a little bit to what we were saying about like conceivable versus meaningful.
Right.
The logic is conceived so perfectly and so detailed and esoterically that the meaningfulness just
Yeah.
like totally goes bunk the same way it does with something like Nathan For You, except in
Right.
that it's funny instead of terrifying.
But I also don't want to insinuate that the actual thought that these people are doing on a day-to-day, even in the community, is anti-factual. I think
No,
that we've
not at
talked
all.
about some extremes where it is. So I'm going to say it's yes and no, and like maybe more of an emphasis on the no with like a high probability of yes.
So it's like a Schrodinger's
High
criteria.
potential for yes.
It's both anti-factual and factual
Yeah.
at the same time.
I think so.
Cool.
Ooh.
Whoa. Got to bring it back to quantum mechanics too. We got to talk. Every episode we have to reference at least like 3 or 4 other
A
episodes.
single thought.
It's all about the throwback, man.
Percentage of life consumed. I'm going to say it feels not that high to me. Like, I know you talked about that one guy who, like, well, basically all he does is work and give money.
Yeah.
But outside of that one example that was given, it's people sitting on a forum. And unless I'm prepared to say that I'm in a cult of Twitter,
Well,
I don't think I am, but I do, I spend some time on there. But I don't know that if you're a user of this forum, you're having a percentage of your life consumed that's high enough to be considered cult-like.
I agree. I think that if everybody on Less Wrong were doing what that one guy was doing and 100% of them believed in Roko's Basilisk and were donating every last possible cent to the Research Institute, then I would say high, but I don't think it's many people doing that.
Right.
So yeah, I would say that's percentage of life consumed fairly low.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you to answer this one. Ritual.
Oh, ritual's high, dude.
High?
Yeah, because like I definitely recommend checking out Less Wrong and reading some of their stuff.
Oh, you said all the acronyms and all the
there's
like
acronyms
jargon
and so much like in jargon and tropiness that references other stuff that's been talked about.
It
on
feels
Less
like you're
Wrong.
talking about TV tropes.
It
You
is.
ever been to TV
I've been
tropes?
to TV tropes, and TV tropes is almost unnavigable.
You can't parse it. It's like you can't.
Right.
It's
All
impossible.
of the vocabulary they use
It's just a
has been
reference.
generated from other parts
Yeah.
of their own site.
It is turtles all the way down there.
And yeah, TV tropes is completely out of control. It's like not even about TV anymore.
No.
It's like about itself.
Yeah, I love TV tropes.
But it's similar to that, where it's like when you first read an article there, it's kind of hard to understand
Right.
because of how referential it is within their own community.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean they're like going to a temple and performing blood
Right.
sacrifices or anything. Like, they're not doing that, but I would say it's fairly ritualistic.
I'm going to ask a question here because that behavior in a forum, that doesn't feel outlandish. That doesn't feel atypical. Like, I'm just thinking about Reddit and some of the subreddits that I frequent on there.
Yep.
And how with many of them, especially like very specialized ones, that kind of thing happens. You've heard, am I the asshole? You've heard that, where it's like people be like, am I the asshole? There's a lot of acronyms going on there. AITI, NA, YTA, various jargon that's used, or like just no mother-in-law, which is a forum about shitty mothers and mother-in-laws. Go read it. It is the greatest tea of all time. These people are insane. But like when you start trying to read these posts, it's like until you get a handle on the jargon and the nicknames and the acronyms on any forum, you're gonna experience that. So does that mean like all of these forums are ritualistic?
I think they have an element of ritual for sure. I think to me, any language that helps designate insiders versus outsiders, to me, feels ritualistic.
Okay.
It's a signaling tool, right? Any language that is a signaling tool as much as it is a communication tool, to me, says ritual.
Okay. Then ritual here is high.
Yeah.
And charismatic leader, yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Mr. Sirman, whatever his name is.
Mr. Yudkowsky.
Yes.
Yeah. He seems pretty charismatic. Generally, he wants to help develop a future that has friendly artificial intelligence instead of malevolent artificial intelligence. So, and also he's very active on his own forum. I mean, he's posting tons of articles and replying to other people's comments and things like that. So he's pretty active. He's definitely there. Is he charismatic? Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I've never seen him like talk in person. I didn't watch a video of him like speaking.
One of the only things you like kind of said about him was that he wrote this post where he called that guy an idiot, which doesn't seem super charismatic, but also charismatic doesn't have to mean like nice.
True.
Like Jay-Z Knight's a dick.
Right, but
And,
she's
like,
also charismatic.
But she's charismatic. Or like a lot of these people are kind of jerky.
All right, so I'm going to go with exists.
I'm going to say there is a presence of a charismatic leader. So
we
got expected harm. We got charismatic leader. We've got niche. We've got semi-anti-factual. I think it's a cult.
I think so. I was leaning cult.
It's cult, man. Got that ritual. The only thing that's kind of like is percentage of life consumed.
Yeah. No, I'm calling cult on this one.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
If anybody is listening to this from Less Wrong, that doesn't mean that it's nothing bad.
If it makes you feel any better, this one said this man right here.
I like you're pointing to me because we're recording the video.
Yeah, but also they know who I'm talking about. Said that I'm in a cult because of my involvement with Cicada 3301.
Yes.
And you called it a benevolent cult.
Benevolent cult, yeah.
I don't
Less
think
Wrong
that this
is, for the most part, aside from occasionally throwing off ideas that make people's brains hurt, I think for the most part is a benevolent cult.
It's neutral to benevolent, yeah.
Yeah.
But probably net positive.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I thought that the stuff that I read on Less Wrong was really interesting. I think Eliezer's mostly a good guy, trying to do the right thing.
I think dedicating that level of thinking is generally a plus, a positive, a good thing.
Right. I think the thing that helps me think about it a lot is kind of going back to that analogy with the mining. They are mining for truths. They are mining for information and insights in this very novel field that involves like some really weird ways of having to think about the world and decisions and whatever. And eventually by doing that, you're going to run into something that could potentially be hazardous.
You know what? Do you want me to draw an analogy here?
Oh my God.
You know what it's exactly like?
What?
You remember that little Flash game Motherlode? It's
yeah,
literally that.
It's like Motherlode. Yeah.
I don't want
spoilers.
I don't want to spoil.
Go play Motherlode.
But go play Motherlode, and please, please believe me when I say you
play to the end.
You have to play to the end. It will seem like nothing's going on, and then all of a sudden you will achieve salvation. It is a fantastic gaming experience and relevant to what we just said, which I don't remember what it was.
Because we were saying that sometimes you mine and discover a hazard. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll also say that if somehow, some miracle, we get somebody that listens to this show from Less Wrong, I would love to interview you. Please contact us at cultorjustweird@gmail.com
or on
hit
Twitter.
Us up on Twitter. I would love to do an interview with one of you guys to talk about the experience from the inside. I usually like trying to get primary sources for this kind of stuff. I wasn't able to this time. I actually tried to find Roko's contact information, but strangely, it's totally not out there. But yeah, I would love to talk to someone that was sort of like experiencing this on the inside. So on the off chance, please contact us.
Question for you. Am I in this cult?
I think we both are.
I'm not part of the community. But
I think we both are because we're both like total singularitarians. I'm
scared of Roko's Basilisk,
and I thought it was like really interesting.
Right.
I'm kind of disappointed that you're still scared of it after all we said.
I'm not that scared of it, but you can't just snap out of it. Aren't you just so great?
I tell you what. When we're done here,
you didn't snap out of it either. You read a shit ton of stuff that I've only heard secondhand from you.
So
my brain needs time.
I'm saying when we're done here, definitely read the Rational Wiki article because it has some additional things that we didn't mention on the show.
I will do that.
Actually, one of the things that I didn't mention, I probably should have, was one of the reasons that they give is that AI isn't just going to be like, oh, I invented Roko's Basilisk now. Like, it's not going to be like off and then on.
Right.
It's going to be, if it exists at all, a gradual process where, one thing affects the next thing, creates the next thing. It's going to be extremely chaotic.
Okay.
And there's going to be no way to trace it back to like whether you, Kayla, did or didn't donate to.
But what about punctuated equilibrium, which for some reason I have talked about on this show multiple times?
That's even if there is punctuated equilibrium, it doesn't mean that the process won't be chaotic.
Okay.
The process absolutely will be chaotic.
Okay.
And you will not be able to trace it back to which butterfly flapped its wings to make the AI happen.
Okay. Good to know.
Mathematically speaking, you will not be able to do that. Even a super intelligent AI will not be able to do that because math.
#math.
Boom.
You're a cult.
You're a cult. So, yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah?
But I'm still mad at you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I understand.
Still mad.
I understand.
Still mad.
All right. Before we sign off, I would like to say to you, our listeners and fans, that whatever set of words that you may have heard that have had the power to destroy you, I promise you'll find the words with the power to heal too, and I hope you find them soon.
That's very nice.
I'm Chris.
I'm Kayla.
And this has been
Cult?
Or Just Weird.